You see this? The magnificent halls, the velvet gowns, the sparkling jewels, a life of pure luxury. Now, take a deep breath. Because behind all this beauty, the palace often smelled so foul that visitors would literally gag. The air, thick with the stench of sweat, perfume, and human waste, was just the beginning. The royals themselves, the icons of power and sophistication, had hygiene habits that would make your stomach turn. Today, we're pulling back the velvet curtain to reveal the filthy truth behind the crown. From parasite-infested wigs to, well, you'll see. These are 5 royal hygiene habits that are sure to make you gag. In fact, they buried it, because if you knew what royalty really smelled like, what their bodies were rotting into beneath the silk and the pearls, you'd stop believing in crowns, thrones, and golden bloodlines forever. Imagine this: you are standing in a gilded hall, chandeliers glittering, velvet drapes heavy with incense, and yet the first thing that strikes you is not majesty, but stench. A sharp cocktail of unwashed flesh, sour wine, rancid oils, and the coppery tang of rot. This was the true perfume of kings and queens. The people who claimed divine right to rule over millions couldn't cleanse themselves of their own corruption. Their flesh betrayed them, their beauty was an illusion, and their refinement was a mask that slipped the moment you got too close. Elizabeth Tudor, the Virgin Queen, Gloriana, the woman who reshaped England into an empire, was not remembered by her courtiers for her fragrance of roses. She was remembered for her teeth that crumbled like coal in her mouth, for wigs crawling with lice, for gowns steeped in sweat and bodily fluids until they could stand on their own. She ruled with elegance in public, but in private, she was a prisoner of her own poison. White lead paste eating her skin alive, rotting her face beneath a porcelain mask. And here's the truth: these were not accidents. This was not just the times. Hygiene, real cleansing, true purity, was denied to the powerful on purpose. The belief that water opened the pores to evil was not ignorance alone, it was conditioning, ritual, superstition woven into control. When kings and queens reeked of rot, when their bodies decayed from within, the illusion of divinity became more fragile. And fragility kept them obedient to forces older and darker than any throne. You see, history presents these figures as icons of glory, but the real story is written in the filth of their bodies. Every palace reeked like a charnel house. Every banquet ended with purges of sickness. Every gown was a coffin for the skin beneath. The true horror is not that they lived this way, but that we were taught never to question it. Why? Because once you understand how corruption seeps from body to soul, you begin to see the same patterns repeating in every institution. And that's what we're about to unearth, the 5 royal hygiene habits so grotesque, so obscene, that they will tear away the last illusions of majesty and reveal power for what it truly is: rot, dressed in gold. The first revelation is this: Queen Elizabeth bathed once every 3 months. Not daily. Not weekly. Once a season, whether I need it or not, she declared. To her courtiers, this sounded refined, almost progressive, because most of her subjects went years without touching water. But look closer, and the truth curdles. Bathing was not discouraged out of ignorance, it was forbidden as a form of control. The belief that water opened the pores to spirits, demons, or disease was drilled into the people by doctors, priests, and rulers alike. And who benefited from a population too afraid to wash themselves clean? Those who ruled over a kingdom of bodies steeped in rot. Dirt is not just filth, it is submission. When Elizabeth did finally enter her great copper tub, the water that kissed her skin was taken straight from the Thames, a river that carried London's sewage, corpses of animals, and runoff of slaughterhouses. Imagine that, the most powerful woman in Europe immersed in liquid decay, her flesh soaking in the same poison her city bled into its waters. And this was celebrated as luxury. Servants perfumed the stinking bath, carried it into her chambers like an offering to a goddess, and yet what they carried was death disguised as ritual cleansing. This wasn't hygiene. This was theater. A performance to convince the world that majesty could exist even in filth. And the soap? Animal fat, lye, and wood ash, so caustic it could strip away flesh. Sometimes already rancid before it touched the queen's body. The very substance meant to purify was a corrosive curse, tearing skin as much as dirt. By the time the weeks crawled by after each quarterly bath, her body became a living archive of sweat, oils, and perfumes gone sour. Courtiers didn't need to see the queen to know she was near, they could smell her arrival like a storm rolling through corridors of stone. But here is where the pattern sharpens. While Elizabeth was painted as untouchable, her body was held hostage by superstition. What if bathing were seen as dangerous not by mistake, but by design? A populace convinced water is deadly will never rise clean, never rise strong. And a queen convinced that filth is safer than purity becomes a puppet in her own palace. This is the first secret: the rulers were never clean. Not in body, not in spirit. They wore decay like a crown, and the world bowed anyway. The second revelation hides not in the skin, but in the mouth. The queen's blackened teeth, once white as ivory, turned into ruins of rot. Elizabeth was famous for her smile, until her smile became infamous. By her 40s, her teeth had darkened completely, and by her 50s, they crumbled like burnt wood when she bit into food. Courtiers recorded how fragments of enamel fell onto her lips as she spoke, and ambassadors whispered home about the unbearable stench that poured from her mouth. But you must understand, this was not simply poor hygiene. It was a ritual of indulgence, a display of status, and a silent killer masquerading as luxury. Sugar. In the 16th century, it was more precious than gold. To consume it daily was to flaunt wealth, to declare yourself above the common man. Elizabeth consumed it in everything: candied violets, sweet wines, marchpane, sugared fruits. She let crystals dissolve on her tongue for hours, bathing her teeth in poison while proclaiming her divine right to excess. And what happened? Her teeth blackened. Her jaw throbbed with constant infection. Her breath became legendary for its violence, compared to battlefields and charnel pits. The Virgin Queen's mouth was a kingdom of death. And yet, here is the darker truth. The medicine she was given to cure her agony was as sinister as the sugar that caused it. Physicians prescribed urine rinses, crushed pearls mixed with wine, even hot irons pressed to her jaw to burn out corruption. These were not cures. These were punishments disguised as remedies, poisons disguised as treatments. Think, if the most powerful woman in England could be tricked into destroying her own body in the name of beauty and medicine, what chance did her subjects have? This was never about health. It was about control. Sugar was marketed as divine nectar, while it rotted bodies from within. Medicine was branded as healing, while it shackled the sick in cycles of dependency. The queen herself, exalted and untouchable, was enslaved by the very luxuries that made her royal. Her body was the battlefield where wealth and decay clashed, and decay always won. So when you hear stories of monarchs ruling with power, remember this: behind their jeweled smiles lay blackened teeth, abscesses, and agony. The rulers of the earth couldn't master their own mouths, yet they demanded obedience from millions. That is the second secret: power feeds on poison. And the higher the throne, the deeper the rot. The third revelation sits atop the head: the wigs. The fiery red hair Elizabeth flaunted was an illusion, a crown of borrowed flesh stitched together from strangers. Beneath those shimmering coils of silk and curls was a scalp ravaged by sores, lesions, and the slow poison of her own cosmetics. Her real hair had long since fallen out, ripped from her skull by the corrosive lead paint she smeared onto her face every morning. And so the Queen of England, mistress of power, destroyer of armadas, wore another woman's hair like a mask of royalty. But the wigs were no salvation. They were prisons of rot. The hair came from peasant women desperate for coin, cut from scalps often crawling with lice and filth before it even reached the palace. Washing was a rarity. Wigs were brushed, powdered, perfumed, but never cleansed. They absorbed sweat, oils, perfumes turned rancid, the smoke of torches, the stench of feasts. Over time, each wig became a sponge of corruption, steeped in months of decay until it carried a stench all its own. Courtiers spoke of the queen's presence lingering in rooms long after she left, not because of perfume, but because of the odor of her hairpieces, heavy and unmistakable. And worse, the lice. Swarms thrived in the humid darkness beneath the wigs, feasting on the queen's sores and feeding on the blood of a woman called Gloriana. Ladies-in-waiting spent hours plucking parasites from her wigs, but they always returned. Imagine the humiliation, the virgin queen, worshipped by poets and generals, scratching at her crown while her court bowed in reverence. The symbol of her power was also the symbol of her corruption. But here is the deeper truth: wigs are not mere fashion. They are lies woven into fabric. They are masks, symbols of authority built on illusion. The queen wore false hair to project eternal youth, even as her body rotted. The world bowed not to Elizabeth, but to an image carefully maintained, painted and perfumed until it drowned out the truth. Does that sound familiar? It should. The world still bows to crowns of deception, governments, corporations, institutions, all wearing their own wigs of illusion, hiding the sores beneath. The third secret is this: power does not cleanse itself. It disguises itself. And every disguise festers. Elizabeth's wigs were not symbols of majesty. They were coffins for her scalp, burial shrouds for her humanity. And yet, the world adored them, proving once again that the masses do not crave truth, they crave spectacle. The fourth revelation is the mask, the porcelain face that stared down kings and terrified her enemies. Elizabeth's skin was never naturally white. The ghostly pallor that became her signature was manufactured every morning with a concoction of white lead and vinegar known as ceruse. To her subjects, it was a vision of eternal purity, untouched by time. But beneath the mask, her flesh was rotting. Every stroke of the brush was another wound. Every layer applied was another nail in her coffin. The mixture burned as it touched the skin. Her eyes watered, her flesh reddened, but she endured, because the mask was her armor. And when it dried, it formed a flawless wall of pale perfection. A wall that cracked as the day wore on, requiring constant repair. She could never fully remove it, she only painted over yesterday's poison with today's fresh coat, building layers of lead until her face was a fragile shell. When it grew too thick, attendants scraped it off with ivory combs, tearing flesh, leaving bloody trails that had to be covered again the next morning. The lead did not stay on her face. It seeped into her blood, poisoning her entire body. Her hair fell out in clumps. Her memory faltered. Her moods darkened into rages and despair. Her skin beneath the mask became a map of sores and scars, a horror show she could never reveal. And yet, every morning, she painted on her death again. She called it beauty. The world called it majesty. But what it truly was slavery. You see, beauty itself was weaponized. The queen's image was not her own, it was a mask maintained by expectation, demanded by her people, enforced by her court. To remove the paint was to remove the illusion of eternal youth, to shatter the myth of the virgin queen. And so she obeyed. She obeyed even as it killed her. Her very face became a prison, a performance of purity while corruption devoured her flesh. And here lies the deeper revelation: power will always sell poison as beauty. It will convince you to sacrifice your health for appearance, your soul for acceptance. Elizabeth was not the first victim of this lie, nor the last. Her painted mask was the crown's greatest illusion, that beneath the rot, a queen could look divine. The fourth secret is this: every mask demands blood. And those who wear them too long forget the face beneath. The fifth revelation is the wardrobe, the magnificent gowns, shimmering with pearls, gold thread, and silk so heavy they could crush the life from a lesser woman. To the world, these garments were symbols of majesty, unmatched splendor draped upon the virgin queen. But beneath the illusion of beauty was something far more grotesque. For these gowns, thousands of them, were never washed. Never cleansed. They were worn again and again, steeped in sweat, perfume, and the secret effluence of a body imprisoned within steel corsets. Each dress became a reliquary of filth, a vessel holding the queen's decay. The process of dressing her was its own ritual of control. First came the shift, a linen undergarment yellowed and stiff with old sweat. Over that, the whalebone corset, laced so tightly it strangled her lungs and crushed her digestion. Then layer after layer of embroidered silk, velvet, and jewels, until the garment weighed 50 pounds or more. Imagine the heat, the suffocation, the moisture trapped between flesh and fabric. Imagine what brewed in those folds: infection, rash, and odors that perfume could not conceal. Courtiers did not whisper of this openly, but they knew. They smelled it when she entered a chamber, they felt the air shift heavy with the rot of cloth turned into a coffin. This was more than poor hygiene. This was another mask. The gown was armor, designed to create an image so dazzling that no one dared look too closely. Her people saw majesty. But her body beneath was gasping, suffocating, corroding. Majesty is often built not on freedom, but on imprisonment. And here is where you must see through the spectacle. The queen's gowns were prisons disguised as treasures. Her beauty was suffocation dressed in jewels. Do you not see the same pattern in the world around you now? Power still forces its servants to wear invisible gowns, costumes of respectability, layers of false virtue, masks of success, while beneath, their true selves suffocate. Elizabeth was trapped in brocade and velvet. You are trapped in illusions just as binding. If you have followed me this far, you are no longer just listening, you are descending. You are peeling back the layers with me. To seal this transformation, write this phrase in the comments not once, but twice: I will never bow to the mask. That is the mark that separates spectators from initiates, those who observe from those who awaken. The fifth secret is this: every garment of power is a shroud. And those who wear them too long forget they are already buried. The sixth revelation festers within, the stomach, the bowels, the hidden chambers of digestion. To the world, Elizabeth was a queen of banquets. Her tables groaned beneath roasted swans, venison dripping with fat, candied fruit sparkling like jewels, wines as sweet as nectar. To dine with her was to enter a theater of abundance, a stage set to display the wealth of empire. But beneath the jeweled platters and golden goblets, her body betrayed her. Her gut was a battlefield. She ate too quickly, swallowing without chewing, her corset tightening around her abdomen, compressing organs until they screamed. Her favorites, fatty meats and mountains of sugar, rotted within her, fermenting into gas so violent her courtiers whispered of it in secret. The Queen of England, mistress of an empire, was haunted by the most human of humiliations: bloating, flatulence, agonizing cramps. At feasts, she sometimes loosened her stays in desperation, hiding the gesture under the table while nobles pretended not to see. They whispered afterward of the stench that rose from the royal presence, a smell that silks and perfumes could not conceal. This was not merely indigestion. It was systemic collapse. Years of sugar corroded her teeth and gut alike. Her food was spiced not for flavor but to mask decay, for much of it was rotten before it reached her lips. She fed on corruption, and corruption fed on her. Her digestion was a mirror of her kingdom, glittering on the outside, putrid within. And here is the deeper truth: appetite is a chain. The ruler chained to desire is no ruler at all. Elizabeth was enslaved not by foreign kings, not by rebellious nobles, but by her own hunger. Her stomach dictated her agony. Her poisons dictated her pain. And yet, she could never stop, for to abstain would have been to admit weakness. So she fed the beast, and the beast consumed her from within. Understand this well: power often hides its slavery in spectacle. Monarchs held feasts to dazzle the masses, but the truth of those feasts was humiliation, sickness, rot. Even today, those who appear to feast in luxury are often the most imprisoned by their appetites. The sixth secret is this: appetite unmakes kings. The body is the first empire, and those who cannot rule it are destined to be ruled by others. Elizabeth's throne may have rested on gold, but her true seat was on a stomach bloated with corruption. The seventh revelation is the breath, the invisible crown that betrayed her more than any failing of flesh. To look at Elizabeth from afar was to see majesty, the powdered face, the jeweled gowns, the fiery wig. But to stand close, to hear her words upon your skin, was to encounter horror. Ambassadors wrote of it in secret letters, describing the Queen's exhalations as worse than the rot of a battlefield left 3 days in the sun. Her mouth, blackened with decay, exhaled poison. The Virgin Queen carried a miasma that could topple the strongest stomach. Courtiers leaned forward to catch her words not out of reverence, but out of necessity, for distance made her speech indecipherable. And yet, the closer they came, the more unbearable the smell. Some fainted. Others clutched pomanders filled with herbs to their faces, disguising revulsion with feigned elegance. Every whisper from the Queen was delivered on the wind of her own corruption. This was majesty not as perfume, but as plague. But here is where the mask cracks wide open. Power is always accompanied by stench. Think of it, the palaces of kings reeked of unwashed bodies, of chamber pots hidden behind tapestries, of perfumes layered over filth. The closer one came to the seat of power, the worse it smelled. It is no different now. The higher the office, the more suffocating the rot, even if modern perfumes disguise it. The smell of corruption always leaks through. And Elizabeth's breath was not merely the product of sugar and neglect, it was symbolic. Her words, the very decrees that shaped England, were delivered on poisoned air. Laws of empire, declarations of war, proclamations of glory, all carried on the breath of rot. The stench was truth made manifest, the crown's authority was corruption, dressed in eloquence but carried on death's wind. Do you see the pattern? The body never lies. While history tells us of Elizabeth's triumphs, her body tells us the truth, that power eats itself, that the closer you come to it, the more unbearable it becomes. The Queen's breath revealed what no coronation could conceal: power stinks. Always. The seventh secret is this: corruption cannot be hidden forever. Perfumes fade. Masks crack. Breath betrays. And those who kneel closest to power are always the first to choke on its stench. The eighth revelation is the corpse that still breathed. In her final years, Elizabeth was not a queen of flesh, but a ghost walking. The mask of white paint grew thicker, the wigs heavier, the gowns more suffocating, yet none of it could conceal what she was becoming. Her skin split open with sores that oozed beneath the lid. Her teeth, blackened stumps, fell from her gums until her meals had to be mashed into pulp. Her hands, once graceful, trembled as if strings pulled by unseen forces. She avoided mirrors, for the mask could no longer deceive even herself. Her ladies whispered of her pacing at night, refusing to lie down, for she believed that if she slept, she would not wake again. She stood for hours, sometimes days, wrapped in velvet and jewels, a corpse propped upright, terrified of her own ending. They say her fingers twisted into knots from arthritis, that her body reeked so heavily of decay that even her closest attendants struggled to endure her presence. The Gloriana of poets was gone. What remained was a body collapsing inward, a skeleton clothed in splendor. But here is the revelation that must not be missed: Elizabeth herself had become the emblem of her empire. She was its living symbol, and like her body, that empire too was rotting from the inside. The wealth of colonies was built on blood. The majesty of the crown was painted over poverty and plague. Like her wigs, like her gowns, like her painted face, the empire was spectacle hiding rot. Elizabeth did not merely embody England, she mirrored it. As she decayed, so too did the truth of her kingdom. This is the pattern of power across all ages. Institutions, like bodies, do not collapse suddenly. They rot slowly, layer by layer, while the mask remains intact for as long as possible. People bow, worship, obey, even as the stench of death surrounds them. By the time the mask finally cracks, the body beneath is already gone. Elizabeth's body revealed the eternal law: power always becomes a corpse before anyone dares admit it. The eighth secret is this: empires die as their rulers die, not with a scream, but with a slow rot disguised as majesty. The ninth and final revelation is the truth hidden in plain sight, that power is not a crown, not a throne, not a banner raised over nations. Power is a sickness. A contagion. A rot that begins in the body and spreads into the soul, until nothing remains but a husk worshipped by the blind. Elizabeth was not merely a woman poisoned by paint, suffocated by gowns, tormented by digestion, and haunted by rot. She was the perfect emblem of what power always becomes: a corpse that pretends to be alive. Look at the pattern again. Her skin, burned by lead, represents the mask of beauty power forces upon all who serve it. Her wigs, infested with vermin, reveal the filth festering beneath every symbol of majesty. Her gowns, never washed, suffocated her as they shimmered to the world. Her gut, bloated with corruption, showed that appetite rules the rulers. Her breath, foul and unbearable, proved that even words of empire are carried on winds of decay. And her final years, walking as a corpse among the living, showed us what every empire becomes in the end. The truth is merciless: power feeds on bodies. It consumes flesh, mind, and spirit, leaving behind only an image. Elizabeth was worshipped as Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, the mother of her nation, but behind the pageantry was a woman enslaved by her own throne. She wore her crown like a chain. She painted her face with death. She became the sacrifice that empire demanded. And so we arrive at the ultimate secret. Power itself is disease. Those who wield it become its first victims, rotting while they still breathe. And those who kneel to it, those who worship the crown, the flag, the office, the spectacle, become infected by its illusions. Power poisons rulers and ruled alike. It makes corpses of kings and slaves of subjects. Understand this, and you will never bow again. Understand this, and you will never worship illusions that rot. Elizabeth was not exceptional, she was the rule. Every throne is a tomb. Every crown is a mask. Every empire is a corpse dressed in gold. The ninth and final secret is this: when you smell decay, know you are close to power. And the only cure is refusal. To bow is to be infected. To kneel is to begin rotting. To awaken is to tear away the mask and step back from the corpse. This is the revelation. This is the descent. And now, you know.